If I asked you to give me a metaphor for conflict, what would you say? So if I asked you, conflict is like ... how would you answer that statement or finish that sentence? I do this with my students in my conflict management courses as well. And they give me a plethora of metaphors for conflict. Conflict is like war. Conflict is like battle. Conflict is like a storm. Conflict is like a scary, I already said storm, but a scary, tornado or torpedo or something, right? So all of these metaphors that my students tend to give me for conflict, at least at the outset, connote some kind of intimidating, formidable experience they want to have end as soon as possible, right? But I asked them, what would happen if we considered conflict not like battle or war, if we considered it like something else entirely, some different dynamic? What if the way we metaphorized conflict was conflict is like a dance, like a tango? Conflict's like a game of Mancala. Did you ever play that game with the little beads or pebbles? Conflict is like a braided woven tapestry. Okay, if we use these other metaphors for conflict, how then might we come to conflict differently? The first thing I want to tell you about conflict that I want you to really take home is that conflict is not inherently problematic. Only dysfunctional conflict is problematic. Conflict actually can be very, very productive, because conflict can surface kind of inconsistencies and issues, and by way of addressing the conflict and sorting it out, we can come up with more creative, more generative, more innovative, more beautiful, more diverse ideas or outcomes. So conflict can be a really, really good thing. And it's almost only through conflict that people can create positive change in many ways. So we need to reframe conflict and think of it as a good thing, as a potentially good thing. Now, that said, there are more and less productive and unproductive ways to go about conflict. Productive conflict looks like collaboration and compromise. Unproductive conflict looks like avoidance, accommodation, or competitive escalation, forcing your position on another person. So there's more and less productive ways to actually engage in conflict. What I also want you to think about today is conflict is not something that happens only in the acute moment of the situation. It's not an isolated incident. It actually happens as this kind of longer journey that involves how you come to the situation. So conflict involves 5 different steps. First, there is the prelude to conflict. This is everything that you come into the conflict with, including your personal history, your mood that day, your emotional state, whether you're hangry or not, your past experience with conflict, what we think of as like baggage or being jaded. If you've had really bad conflict in the past, that will come with you as you enter a new conflict situation. That's the prelude. Then we have the triggering event. That's step 2. This is the thing that actually kind of ignites the conflict. Someone did something or said something that got you riled up, or vice versa, right? Then there is the initiation phase. This is when conflict becomes obvious to you and you're like, okay, I'm in conflict now. Then there's the differentiation phase. This is when both parties are now aware that there's conflict. There's maybe arguing, there's some tense words, there's some awkwardness, maybe there's some stonewalling, like someone's closing down, doesn't want to talk anymore, okay? But it's clear to both parties or all parties that conflict is present. Then hopefully will lead to the 5th phase, which is the resolution phase. The resolution phase is where conflict is kind of hashed out and the group or the 2 people involved or 2 or more people come to a solution. Now, what's interesting is this is not a linear thing. It's cyclical. It's recursive, because once we get to the differentiation phase and then we get to the resolution phase, the resolution and everything leading up to it now are part of the prelude. They get taken into the next conflict because they become part of the person or group's history with conflict. So when we think about it like this process, it becomes a lot more dynamic. And we don't see instances of conflict just as this one acute thing that happened. We see them as part of a larger system of communication, team dynamics, and overall organizational dynamics, which is really, really important, because then conflict doesn't become so much about just the 2 or more people involved. It becomes part of the system.